On a hot summer day, I was home alone, sweating buckets because the AC was busted. I had all the windows wide open, trying to catch a breeze. It was quiet, too quiet for a neighborhood that's usually bustling with noise. I was chilling in the living room, trying to read, but mostly just nodding off. As the sun started setting, I noticed the kitchen window was still open. I went over to shut it, annoyed at myself for forgetting. Just as I was about to close it, I saw a shadow move past the front door. My heart skipped a beat and I froze.
"Hey, who's there?"
I yell, trying to sound tough, but my voice wobbling. No answer. I grabbed a heavy book and tiptoed towards the hallway, where I heard noises from my bedroom. Peeking around the corner, I saw someone rummaging through my stuff, stuffing things into a bag.
"Get out of my house!"
I shouted, trying to scare him off. He turned towards me, big and scary looking. Instead of running, he charged at me. I swung the book, but he grabbed it and knocked me down. I scrambled to my feet and bolted to the bathroom, locking the door behind me. I called 911, my hands shaking so badly I could barely dial.
"There's a guy in my house. Hurry!"
I whispered urgently. I heard him banging on the bathroom door, yelling to let him in.
"I'm calling the cops!"
I screamed back, hoping he'd back off. He cursed at me and I heard him running through the house. Outside, I heard sirens approaching. Relieved, I stayed in the bathroom until the police came in. They searched the house, but the guy was gone. They said a neighbor saw him fleeing who called 911 as well. I was scared out of my mind, but grateful I was safe. After that, I made sure all the doors and windows were locked tight, and I double-checked them every night. It was one of those sticky summer nights when the air was thick and the stars barely peeked through the haze. My buddy Mike and I decided to take a walk down the old trail near town, looking for a quiet spot to have a campfire and crack open a few beers. We were always up for an adventure, especially in the summer, when the woods felt alive with mystery. As we strolled along the trail, the sounds of crickets and rustling leaves filled the air. The moon cast eerie shadows, making everything seem a bit spooky, but exciting at the same time. We found a clearing by a small creek, perfect for our night out. We set up our makeshift campfire, laughing and joking about old times as we cracked open our first beers. The fire crackled, sending sparks dancing into the darkness. The warmth was comforting, the beer cooling our throats as we talked about anything and everything. But as the night wore on, a sense of unease settled over us. Maybe it was the way the trees whispered in the wind, or the way the shadows seemed to stretch a bit too far. Mike joked about ghosts and monsters, trying to brush off the eerie feeling creeping up on us. Suddenly, I noticed movement at the edge of the clearing. A figure standing among the trees, watching us. My stomach dropped, and I nudged Mike, pointing discreetly. He squinted into the darkness, his face growing serious.
"Hey, who's there?"
Mike called out, his voice echoing slightly in the quiet night. No response. The figure didn't move, just stood there, silent and unmoving. A chill ran down my spine as we both stared, waiting for something, anything. Then, without warning, the figure started walking towards us, slow and deliberate. Mike stood up, stepping in front of me, protectively.
"Hey, stay back!"
he shouted, his voice trembling slightly. As the figure came closer, we could make out more details. A tall, thin man with a ragged jacket and wild eyes. His face was hidden in the shadows, but we could feel his intent, something dark and menacing. I grabbed a stick from the fire, holding it like a makeshift weapon.
"We don't want any trouble!"
I called out, trying to sound braver than I actually was. But the man kept coming, his steps quickening. Panic surged through me as I already realized he wasn't going to stop. Mike yelled again, louder this time, warning him to stay away. Then in an instant, the man lunged at us, a guttural scream tearing through the night. Mike swung the stick, catching him across the shoulder. but it didn't slow him down. He knocked Mike to the ground, the force of the impact knocking the wind out of him. I screamed, scrambling backwards as the man turned towards me, his eyes burning with rage. Adrenaline flooded my veins as I swung the stick, desperation giving me strength. It connected with his arm, but he barely flinched, grabbing me by the collar. Fear consumed me as he pulled me close, his breath hot and foul against my ear. "You shouldn't have come here," he hissed, his voice low and menacing. I struggled, kicking and punching, trying to break free. Mike recovered quickly and tackled the man from behind, knocking him off balance. We scrambled away, adrenaline and fear driving us to run as fast as we could through the woods behind us. The man cursed and shouted, his footsteps thundering after us. Branches slapped against our faces, roots tripped us up. But we didn't stop until we burst out onto the main trail, gasping for breath. We didn't look back until we were safely back in town, surrounded by streetlights and the comforting hum of civilization. We called the police, trying to explain what had happened through shaky breaths and tears. They searched the woods but found no trace of the man. They told us to stay safe and call if we saw him again, but the memory of those wild eyes and that chilling threat haunted us long after that summer night, a reminder that darkness could lurk, even in the most peaceful places. This is one of the most traumatic experiences from my childhood. I don't like talking about it, but I figured that if I just write this out once, it will bring me some closure. It was the hottest summer I could remember, the kind where the air sticks to your skin like syrup. School was out, and every day felt like an adventure waiting to happen. I was 9 years old, full of energy and curiosity, and my best friend Ellie and I spent every moment we could exploring our neighborhood. One scorching afternoon, Ellie and I decided to ride our bikes to the park. It was a favorite hangout, with its sprawling fields and shady trees offering relief from the relentless sun. We played on the swings and raced each other around the empty playground until our laughter echoed throughout the empty park. As the afternoon stretched on, we noticed a man sitting alone on a bench near the edge of the park. He was wearing a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes, even though the sun was already starting to set. Ellie nudged me, whispering that she had never seen him there before. We watched him quietly, a feeling of unease sitting over us like a heavy blanket. Curiosity got the best of us, and we decided to ride our bikes closer to get a better look. As we approached, the man glanced up, his eyes locking onto us with an intensity that sent a chill down my spine. I felt uneasy, but Ellie, always the bolder one, greeted him with a tentative smile.
Hi,
she said, her voice tinged with nervousness. The man didn't reply at first, just stared at us with an unsettling expression. Then with a slight grin, he asked, "Do you girls like ice cream? I know a place not far from here that has the best ice cream in town." Alarm bells went off in my head. Ellie looked at me, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. Something about the man's offer didn't sit right with either of us, but we were too polite and too scared to just turn around and leave.
Maybe another time,
Ellie replied hesitantly, her hand tightening on her bike handle. The man's grin widened, revealing yellow teeth. "Come on, it'll be fun. I'll even buy you both a cone," he urged, his voice coaxing but firm.
We really should be going,
I piped up, my voice trembling despite my attempt to sound brave. That's when things took a sinister turn. The man's smile vanished, replaced by a dark scowl. In a swift motion, he stood up and lunged towards us. Ellie and I screamed in terror, pedaling our bikes as fast as we could. The man chased after us, his footsteps pounding on the pavement behind us. Heart racing, I glanced back and saw him gaining on us. Panic surged through me as I urged my legs to pedal faster, tears streaming down my face. Ellie was ahead of me, her bike wobbling as she fought to keep her balance. We raced through the park, weaving between trees and playground equipment. Fear consumed us, but we dared not look back again, knowing the man was still hot on our heels. The sun was setting fast, casting long shadows that seemed to reach out and grab us as we rode. Finally, we reached the edge of the park where our neighborhood began. With a burst of adrenaline-fueled strength, we pedaled even harder, tears blurring my vision. I could hear Ellie crying ahead of me, her sobs mixing with mine. Just as I thought we couldn't go on any further, we turned onto our street and saw our houses up ahead. We screamed for help as loud as we could, praying that someone would hear us and come to our rescue. Thankfully, a neighbor watering his lawn heard our cries and rushed over. The man, realizing he had been spotted, turned and disappeared into the fading light. The neighbor comforted us, calling the police while Ellie's mum came running out of her house, tears streaming down her face. The police arrived quickly, but the man was long gone. They took our statements and searched the park, but there was no sign of him. Ellie and I were shaken to the core, clinging to each other as our parents held us close. That night, as I laid in bed, the events of the day replayed in my mind like a horror movie. I couldn't shake the image of the man's sinister grin or the sound of his footsteps chasing us through the park. Summer, once a season of freedom and fun, had turned into a nightmare I would never forget.